Welcome back to the Respect the Drive podcast. I'm Tedward, and today we have a Cannonball driver. Yes, Sam Lurie was a co-driver on the Boston team's second run in that Audi S8 Plus. But he's more than just a Cannonball driver because he's actually done all three elements of what we consider in modern cannonballing. He's been a spotter, he's been a driver, and he's worked mission control. So it's great to see the perspective from somebody who's really seen cannonball from every angle. But Sam didn't enter the scene through Cannonball. He's actually been one of the OG Boston car scene dudes. He's been around for a long time. In fact, I've known Sam for probably 15 years, and I didn't really get to know him up until recently when we started doing this Cannonball stuff. But you've also seen his cars on my channel. He has contributed his Hummer H1, his Nissan Figaro, his insanely powerful 996 Turbo, and his S65 AMG. So yeah, he's a car guy through and through. And when we start talking, we're going to talk a little bit about his cars and his introduction into the car scene and how the Boston car scene got up and started. If you're not interested in that, which I do find quite interesting, it's very fun, but if you want to just get straight to the Cannonball stuff, skip ahead a little bit. But first, how are you doing? Are you okay? It's been a long, brutal winter. It's just been gloomy. It's not that we've had massive snowstorms or anything, which honestly, I wish we had more of. The content I can create with a good snowstorm is a beautiful thing. But man, I just feel like I've been trapped indoors. And the one thing I'm not worrying about is my E39 M5 up in Garage 42 in Woburn, Massachusetts. It's so nice to know that my M5 is safe and protected under camera surveillance in the nice, warm atmosphere of Garage 42. So if you're interested in storing your car at Garage 42, give them a call, garage42.com. But I just can't wait to get that E39 M5 out of storage and back on the road. I can't wait to go to a Cars and Coffee event. Fingers crossed we can have Cars and Coffee events this summer. But if you are just in it for the coffee, go to motorizedcoffee.com, get 10% off your coffee order with coupon Tedward. All right, enough about that. Let's get into it with Sam Lurie. All right, well, Sam Lurie, you are like OG Boston car scene. In fact, you are somebody who, when I was coming up in my college years in the early 2000s, 2006 through 2010, you would have been the guy rolling into a car show with your 996 twin turbo with the basalt plate back then. And You also had, well, it wasn't the S65 you have now. You had another S65, right?
I did. I had an 06 in black before the one I have now.
And I just always remember, like, those were the two cars that were kind of showstoppers. And that was when Boston's car scene wasn't supercars yet, but that was as close as we would get. Like, we had Yuppie Racing, which would you consider yourself a co-founder?
No, not really. I mean, that was, more of a Pete Ladas thing back in the day, but it is funny how the Boston Cars and Coffee scene got started, because in January of 2000 is when I bought that 996 Turbo. And I remember, driving it home in the snow from New York and being so excited about how I have this, amazing car. And all I wanted to do was show it off. And I reached out to Pete and I said, Pete, we got to do something. I want to show this car off. It's January and it's freezing out, but I'm so excited about this thing. I'm hearing about these car shows in Irvine, California called Cars and Coffee. We don't do anything like that.
Why are we doing this?
We should make this a thing. Like, let's do this. Like, let's make a thing so I can show my car off, because I was so excited about it back then. It was like my first real, like, big boy car. And Pete had all those connections and all those contacts. And I remember, he did a lot of the legwork behind setting up that first official Cars and Coffee Boston meetup that we had. And it was in Burlington, in a parking lot outside of Dunkin' Donuts. And it might have been late January or early February 2008. And I don't know if we had 40, 50, 60 cars and people standing outside in 20-degree weather. It was unbelievable. And that's kind of like where it all really started.
It's weird because today, pretty much every major city has some sort of supercar gang, right? Everyone has the new Pista. Someone's always coming, someone's always going to have the next big thing. So whether it's like an SVJ or a Performante or a Pista or the McLaren 600 LT, whatever, like every city now has that. Back then, that didn't exist. And I can remember even going to car shows and it was a treat if you saw a Ferrari. It was like, whoa, somebody has an F355. And then this kind of like car scene in Boston started occurring, and it started being like, wait a minute, these cars are all kind of like congregating. These people are now friends. All the people who normally were on their own, who just had their own, oh, I bought my Ferrari, but I don't know any Ferrari people. Finally, all these people kind of knew each other. And the Boston car scene started evolving. And it's funny because when you look back at photos or videos from those days, it's not that hardcore compared to today, but it seems so hardcore at the time. Like, you'd see your 911, the turbo, which has been on the channel, and we'll talk about that because all of your cars have been on the channel now. You've contributed significantly to my view count over the last 12 months. But you'd see like a Lotus Esprit, you'd see maybe a Ferrari 360 and the 911, and then everyone had an M3, and those were like the baby supercars.
Yeah, I mean, there were times where I remember because I had an E46 M3, and so many other folks had E46 M3s. And we were all on E46 fanatics. And there was like the group of us, and then there were the guys with the STIs and the Evos. And I remember like everyone in our age group had one of those 3 cars.
That was it. And they weren't cheap either. STI was a $40,000 car. It still is. Now it's cheap, I guess, right? But it was then, and that was almost 20 years ago. That was a really significant thing. So anything with 300 horsepower at the time was kind of considered like, oh, you've got something here. And then the tuners started coming out. Everything really changed in those, like, that 2005 to 2010 timeframe.
That was a great car. I remember that I wanted to buy an M5 at the time, and found one I really liked and couldn't afford it. And I was bummed that I missed out on it. And about 6 months went by, and I'm still looking, trying to buy an M5, E39 M5. And an E46 M3 came up for sale that ended up being the same price as the M5 I couldn't afford about 6 months earlier. And that's what I ended up getting. And that car was really bulletproof for like 2 years. I took it to track days and autocrosses. I took it to rallies, I took it to car shows. And these were the days with like New England Rally where we just did crazy drives where we'd drive to like Niagara Falls without stopping, like, let's go. And that car never really missed a beat. I just feel like I was ready for, I don't know, something a little more serious. I don't know, maybe that car was getting like a boy racer reputation a little bit in my mind. And I wanted something a little more adult, a little more sophisticated with a lot more horsepower. And that's what led me to going the 996 turbo route.
Yeah, that car is absolutely that car. It's crazy because by today's standards, that car is fast. It still scares me a little bit. I mean, I get in that thing and it's like, if you chose not to lift, if you chose to just stay in it, it's a 200 mile an hour car.
Yeah, I haven't been that fast in it. A couple of other people have driven it faster than I have.
It's always good to have
we
those
don't have
friends.
to name names, but I've had it well into the triple digits, and I know a few folks, 2 or 3 folks I can think of that have come real close to that 200 number that have had it. That I haven't even been in the car when those have happened, but I've either been next to it or had it go past me or heard about it after the fact.
Well, that sets us up perfectly for why you're on here for the most part. Is you are now a proper Cannonballer as of we won't give exact dates, but let's say maybe springtime of last year. You did the thing. You put your money where your mouth was, and all of those years of those rallies, those New England drives or those blasts up to Niagara Falls or whatever. It was like, you know what? It's time to do the whole country.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
bucket list item for sure, man.
And what an undertaking, especially to be part of a team that was taking it as seriously as they were, because it wasn't like you kind of came in at a good point, because first of all, you've also done something that very few people have done. You've done the trifecta of cannonballing, which is you've spotted for a cannonball, you've driven in a cannonball, and now more, in a more sophisticated way, you've done mission control for a cannonball.
Yeah, I think I was really fortunate in that I had the opportunity to do all 3. Nobody knows that that's what's going to be the eventual outcome when we start talking about this in the early stages of planning. I remember planning with the guys well in advance and knowing that, I was part of the team, but I wasn't going to be one of the folks in the car. And that if something happened, if someone couldn't go, if there was an illness or something, that I'd be the one to step in. But the A plan was that I wasn't going to be going on that first run. So I wanted to help out in any way that I could. I said, help me in the planning. I'll help with the strategizing. I'll do spotting, whatever I can do to help you guys as much as I can. I want in. So that first run that the team did, I did a section of spotting in Pennsylvania, and it was great. And I thought this would be the extent of my Cannonball experience, was that, providing that coverage for that zone and being part of that journey. And I was happy with that. That was great. And then obviously, that, one of the drivers ended up getting sick in the car and didn't make it all the way there. They had some other struggles that ended up, putting their time not where they wanted it to be.
It was close though. They were.
Super close.
5 minutes. That run was 5 minutes off of the record, which is like still to this day drives me out of my mind because, think about that. To find 5 minutes is not hard to find, especially in that run. That was a very amateur run. But I don't think we were gearing up for that to be the run, right? I don't know that any of us were like, I don't think in the back of my mind, even kind of filming it and helping out. And I wasn't doing mission control in the way that we have it now. It was a little more freeform. I don't think any of us looked at that as the first run. We thought this is the run.
Right. I never thought until after it was over and they had missed by 5 minutes, there would be another one of these. We always thought that was going to be it. And then, immediately after, when you fall short by just that margin, now I'm thinking, oh man, there's probably going to be another go. We can't let this be the one go. And that's when I start thinking about how, well, there are going to be some changes next time, and I might get my shoulder tapped for an opportunity, and I'm going to be all over that if that's the case. And I was very fortunate in that that's exactly what happened.
I remember because we went to your house for the after party, so we kind of had a thank you to all the spotters and all the people, and then Chris, and Matt told their story. We'll get Matt on the podcast at some later date. It's funny. I think about him coming on and telling stories. It's like less about Cannonball and more about him just being like a crazy person who buys the nuttiest cars. But that's neither here nor there. That day, when we were going through all that, I remember Doug and Arnie. Was that the day Doug and Arnie went and set the actual next record?
Yes, because after most of the folks that had gathered at my house for our campfire and our thank yous and our storytelling had all left, a few of us hung back and we were watching them on Glimpse just do ridiculous speeds where we had just driven and not done those speeds, thinking, well, if we're ever going to do this again, the bar is going to be even higher than it already is.
And I'm trying to remember. This is the thing. Everything's getting very muddled because a lot happened in that 6 to 8 months that we were doing this. Was that when they set the 25-39?
Yes, but nobody knew that except us.
Right. Because I remember actually when I did the video of the S8 Plus after your run, there is a binder in the back, and I opened the binder, and at the last minute in editing, I realized I accidentally showed their run, and I cut it, and it didn't make it in because I didn't know them personally, so I was like, oh my god, if I let that out, I would have been such an asshole to be like the guy who blew up their spot or what an Easter egg, right?
We knew the whole time that was the mark to beat when the world didn't know, and you can imagine having been in the shoes of the guys that had already done this once, how much more fast we needed to go this time than they had gone last time, because we're talking like an hour faster.
It was
basically
crazy.
Than what we needed to go before. And I'm feeling this pressure. Like I'm joining the team now. I'm in the car now. I just don't want to let these guys down.
Right.
I'm excited for my own personal, bucket list life story item, but I don't want to disappoint these guys either. This, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of risk, and I just want to do my part.
Yeah, for reference, the new record at this point now is 25:39. Was that what it was?
Yeah.
And then the run they had just done prior to you joining the team was a 26:43. So over an hour had been lobbed
Right.
off this time. Now, at the first run, they're like, "Oh, good. All we have to do is make up five. Like, all we have to do is do 5 minutes faster, like 6 minutes faster." We
Right. And when you look at all the things that didn't go right on that first run,
two
we could have just
pullovers
fixed any one of those things and saved 5 minutes.
easily,
Right.
and we're still deep in coronavirus, and things were looking good. I mean, not in society, but for Cannonballers, at least there was a bright side to the world being in shambles. And then Doug and Arnie go off and just do this obliterating record. And that's where you guys come in. You join the team, and it's like, whoa, we really need to change the strategy.
It was, it's never far from your mind about the gravity of what you're doing. So everything that we had talked about the first time is being reanalyzed. The microscopic sized details of every single planning aspect are being analyzed by everyone involved, and any opportunity there is to go faster, be more efficient, we're thinking about how can we save time, how can we be faster.
What were the conversations? What was your onboarding process like? I mean, what was it like joining these two guys? Because now you've got two guys who have done it once, and they know.
Yeah.
They're forever changed, right? Like, they're no longer virgins, because it's no longer just the pie in the sky, like, oh yeah, Cannonball, the final frontier of American driving across the country. No, it's like they've done it. They know how miserable it is. They know what it's like to lose, and then you're coming in as a third driver that needs to make up time and be, what was it like to walk into the team as a new driver?
Yeah. So I mean, I feel that pressure. I remembered that the Chris's called me. We had like a conference call, the three of us, where they explained where they were. And I know that, the ask or the opportunity is coming. They're about to say, do you want to go for the next run? And inside I'm just like, yep, I'm in, let's go. I can't say yes fast enough. But at the same time, I want to show these guys that I understand how serious this is, and that I take it seriously, and that I've thought about it, and I want to do whatever I can to help. So while I wanted to shout out, yes, I also wanted to show them that, this was a team effort for everybody, and it wasn't just something I wanted to do for me.
Right. You have to be tempered, because at the same time, it's incredibly exciting. You recognize that it went from being an exciting event for them to almost like a job. Like, this is a mission. We're here to complete the mission. If we win, we can celebrate.
Well, there's so many other people involved with helping us that we don't want to let them down either. They're volunteering their time and their effort to some expense in a lot of cases, and you don't want to let them down either.
Yeah, this one went from, I think the first run, maybe 15 spotters, and then the second run, the one that you ran, we were up around 30, because it was supposed to essentially space out 100 miles per spotter across the country.
Yeah.
And so that was a large undertaking, because now you go from like, oh, it's basically a group of my friends, because we know 15 people, sure. 30 people, it starts to get to a point where you're like, I actually only know about half of these people who are helping me do this.
Well, the guys asked me to bring spotters with me, right? If you're going to come and be part of this, there's some expectations for you to come join the team. And one of those expectations came in the form of, we need you to bring more spotters. We got gaps we need to fill, and you need to bring people to do that. So I think I brought, I don't know, another 5 or 6 folks that I knew from not just here in the Northeast, but other parts of the country that were willing to fly places, willing to drive places, including one of my buddies who lives in Maine, who was willing to drive all the way to Utah.
I remember he's great, because I remember he shared his glimpse with me, because this was the first run that I did a proper mission control. And he shared his glimpse with me like the day he was driving out there. And he was my test bed, because I could just follow him going through the country. And it helped me a lot, actually, to like figure out, okay, this is what I'm going to be looking at. This is how I'm going to be able to communicate with these people. So the climate changed a bit too when you guys went on this run, because when you set up in New York, it wasn't just a normal COVID day where it's empty streets. George Floyd had just been murdered, and protests abound all over the country, and New York was big. Do you remember, I remember vividly because we were set up in mission control in a shipping container, a literal shipping container with a few of us. And I remember you guys sitting in front of Red Ball, and we were looking at the roads and the route, and over the police scanner, we could hear where they were starting to close roads.
Yeah. So you have to remember that was the weekend where protests nationwide were breaking out, and there were riots and vandalism and just a lot of civil unrest nationwide. And here are the three of us, trying to drive across the country as fast as we can at the same time. So there's that juxtaposition of like, there's some serious cultural issues going on in this country. And here are the three of us, gallivanting across the country as fast as we can. So I mean, certainly we're aware of that happening. And because we have a police scanner in the car, we're hearing about all these things as we're driving from Boston to New York. We're hearing about, cities being locked down and roads being closed. And I remember getting to the Red Ball in New York, and I mean, the prison buses were queued up not a block or two away from where we were outside the Red Ball. We could see the paddy wagon staged for the mass arrests that we're planning. And we're hearing about this march of folks going through the city, and it's building and building, and they're worried about riots breaking out and looting and vandalism. And they're talking about closing the bridges. And the three of us are like looking at our watches, like, we got to get out of here. We might get stuck here if we don't get out of here.
I can remember the countdown, and the countdown was not only about like, let's get out of here. It was they're going to close a bridge, or they're going to close a tunnel, or they're going to close a road that we need to get out. And
right.
And for anyone listening, that's not just oh shoot, now we have to wait. It's like, no, you have 30 cars scattered across the country waiting for you to be there at a certain time to do their job. And
right. If we leave too early, the math is wrong.
The math is wrong. So you can't just leave. And if you wait too long, like, you basically screwed everybody's flight plans home because now they can't get back on the airplane. So yeah, that was, it all worked out. But isn't it, that's the thing about Cannonball. It was like, in the back, deep down, your moral compass is like, wow, the country is going through some shit right now. But at the same time, you're like, well, we have a task, and regardless of what's going on in the world right now, we need to accomplish this goal.
Yeah, I think it was, COVID precautions happening at the same time that may have led to, some roads being more clear. It's certainly on the first 2/3 of the drive that certainly helped us. And then, whether it's true or not, and we'll never know, but you got to figure that with riots in 40 cities happening that night, there had to be a significant amount of law enforcement that was not out patrolling the highways, that had been recalled into these major metropolis areas, into major, towns and cities, and that weren't out on the roads. Because, I remember as we left New York, crossing New Jersey into Pennsylvania, just the train of police cars with lights and sirens headed into the city when we were leaving.
Speeding was absolutely the last concern of any cop in the United States that day.
Yeah, they were going the other direction too.
They were, and it was wild because while we were planning to bounce out of the city, they were all going into the city. And you'd hit a few cities along the way. And I remember the one city that was scary going into Ohio, I think it was Cleveland, we started getting reports that they were possibly going to close highways. And they did. Luckily, they weren't highways we needed, but we weren't sure where they were going to cut them off. And I can remember thinking, like, the first few hours into this, like, oh my God, we're already cooked. Like, we're already going to have to reroute before Cleveland. Like, this is not good.
Yeah. So my mind was not thinking about that at that time. I was in the back seat when we started, and I'm in a car that I've been in only once before. I've driven only once before, although I did drive from Boston to New York to get another, opportunity to have some seat time. But, these guys have done this once already. They own the car. They're super comfortable with the car. They know what the car's like at speed. So here we are. We leave. We are just flying through the tunnel out of the city. Now we're out of the city, and we are just going obscene speeds on public roads.
That was in the back seat. That was fast getting out of the city too, because I remember your run Red Ball to New Jersey was like sub 10 minutes.
We were flying. I'm in the back seat. My seatbelt is fully locked. Like, whether you want it to be or not, I'm in the back seat. I'm holding on to the door handle. The seatbelt is locked, and all I can think of is this is going to be like this for the next day.
It's
right?
like
24 plus hours.
Yeah, it's like a rocket launch,
gonna be
except it
this
never,
madness.
it never relaxes. Like a rocket launch, I feel
No.
like you at least get to go to space, and then everything calms down a little bit, and you just do your job. This is just like, no, it's just launch after launch after launch after launch for 26 hours.
Yeah, these guys knew exactly what to expect. They had done it before. They seemed so calm and comfortable and collected. And I'm just trying to keep my composure in the back seat and not have a panic attack, right? Like I said, I don't want to let these guys down. So I'm just trying to maintain control. Like, sure, I'm very used to going 165 on public roads at night. Sure.
What is it like looking out? So for me, the biggest thing at that speed is animals. Like I'm less concerned about traffic because it's like, well, I can see traffic for the most part. You can kind of predict that. And what like the thing that scares me the most, and I don't know how you get over this, is a deer. It's like you killed a bird personally.
True story. Yeah, that did happen.
Yeah, you're going about 130 and it was a whoa. And the funniest part about that is the sarcasm in the car because you're a little bit horrified because you just heard a horrible sound as you're in control of this vehicle at 130 miles an hour. Chris Benvey looks over and goes, "Think he lived?" And it was just so funny and dry that I was like, this is how you can tell they're like really comfortable doing this now.
Yeah, there's no time to react to wildlife, whether it's a deer or a bird at that speed. I remember seeing this thing come across my field of vision from left to right and trying to yell the word bird because I know like I've got a guy in the back seat working phones, talking to you, looking at maps, checking out computers. I got a guy in the front seat who's looking out binoculars, right? I'm really the only one kind of looking out the front window at what's right in front of us in the moment. And I tried to yell bird. And I mean, I didn't even make it to the D in bird before we liquefied this thing on the windshield.
How did
there's no avoiding it.
How did it feel? So you were the second stint. So the way this car was fantastic. The Audi was great on fuel. So the Audi you could kind of do in the country in, big chunks because you could do 600-700 miles on a tank. So you get your first opportunity to drive somewhere in Illinois, I think. Is that right?
Yes, somewhere like that.
So you got a good chunk of the way. What did it feel like getting in the driver's seat for the first time at night? I mean, it's nighttime. It's late, and you've been in the car. You've seen what's expected of you.
Right.
And
right.
now you have
to remember, we've all been up since like 7 or 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, right? That's when my body wakes up normally. So I'm getting up 7:30 in the morning on Saturday. I'm awake all day Saturday. And then we all meet up in the Boston area and we left at whatever it was, like 2 o'clock. And then we drove to New York. And then we left New York at, I think it was 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
That we left. And now I'm getting into the driver's seat at, it was like 3 or 3:30 in the morning. So I've been awake for 21 hours.
And not a single minute of this is enjoyable.
Or 19 hours. I've been awake around 20 hours. And now I need to get in the driver's seat of this car and drive the fastest I've ever driven in my life, the furthest I've ever driven in my life, the best I've ever driven on my life. Oh, and I'm going to do this in a car I'm unfamiliar with, on roads I'm unfamiliar with, at night. So here's my plan for how to overcome this. I'm going to bring some caffeine with me so that I'm properly caffeinated.
I already feel like I have to
energy,
pee.
And I have plenty of focus. So, I mean, we were carefully rationing our water intake, so I wasn't too worried about the bio break stuff, but I was worried about mental fatigue and obviously like physical fatigue from being tired. And I don't usually have any caffeine in my diet normally. It's very rare that I have caffeine, but I brought 5-hour energy with me. I brought some caffeinated chocolate with me. And when we were looking at, okay, we're going to be stopping in the next, 30 or 50 miles, it's like, okay, I'm going to have some caffeinated chocolate. I'm going to pound a 5-hour energy. And in about 20 minutes from now, when I need to get in that driver's seat, I am going to be ready to go. That was the plan. So I executed according to the plan, and we left the gas station, and I'm flooring this thing on the on-ramp to get up to speed on the highway, and I'm literally having a panic attack, like behind the driver's seat. I am so hyped up on caffeine that when you add the adrenaline of the moment in and the weight of what we're doing, it was like I'm having a heart attack at the same time. I remember, and I mean, you probably could hear it in the video. I remember like having to take deep breaths to try to calm myself down. And Chris is in the front seat saying, "You're doing great. Calm down. Everything's okay. You're doing a great job. Take deep breaths." And I'm literally shaking, just so crazy high on life in that moment.
It's a lot to take in.
Right.
Did it calm down? Did you get to a point where you started to go, this is what's happened? Because I know every time I've gone on a rally or a cruise, the first like dose of it is a lot. And you're like, oh my God, this is what we're doing. And eventually you get to a point where like 130, 140 miles an hour stops feeling fast. And you're just like, this is just what we're doing. We're in a rhythm. Like, did you start to fall into a rhythm where you felt comfortable, or was it just constant? I mean, now you've got actual like chemicals in your body that are that are probably not helping this.
It took a lot of time before I started to even feel a little bit comfortable, if comfortable is the word you even want to use, because all I'm thinking about is I want it to be daylight. I want to be able to see. I just don't want it to be dark anymore.
Which is so bizarre, because it's like the antithesis of speed in a Cannonball. It's like everything happens under darkness.
How much further do I need to drive this car before it's going to be light out and I can see? And then I'll feel so much better when it's daylight, and then I'll calm down because I'll be able to see. And I remember, we're obviously traveling in the wrong direction, so the night is longer than it should have been because we're driving west and not east. So that's like extra time that I hadn't factored in, that I'm driving in the dark. And then when it finally starts to get light out, it's not getting like nice sunrise light out. It's getting like overcast. It looks like it's going to rain out daylight. And then, of course, it rained, which was not fun at all, because that brought our speed down. And now I'm having panic attacks about wet roads.
Yeah, you had a good stint in the rain. That was no joke. And that's the thing. I think you were holding on to kind of like 135, 140 for the most part for a lot of that time. And then it was like, 110 at best was kind of where it came down to, because it wasn't like light rain, like and the roads were poorly drained. Like those were like they were standing water.
Right. I was relying heavily on Chris to give me guidance and feedback on what he wanted me to do. And I remember, and I'm sure you remember, me just telling Chris, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do.
You were good about
how fast to go,
like
when to go. Just tell me what to do.
You were like, you were like a proxy. It was basically just like, you want me to go 130, I'll go 130. You want me to go 90, I'll go 90.
So I just did what I was told, and I tried to not hyperventilate and have a panic attack, and tried not to shake too much. And I was, certainly death grip on the steering wheel. And we powered through the darkness. We powered through the rain, and then I think I started feeling better, that it was daylight, it was dry. And then, of course, we hear on the scanner that the cops are looking for us, and I'm the one behind the steering wheel.
Of course. And that was in, what state was that? Was it Nebraska?
Nebraska.
Yeah, because I remember
And I'm just thinking about, we've had multiple people call us in, because we're passing people doing double or triple the speed limit.
Yeah,
at this
easily,
point.
yeah.
And they might not be able to identify the exact make and model that we're in, but we're still driving a black sedan that's identifiable.
Black sedan was the words that said, hey, something's happening. And here's the other thing is, like, there wasn't much traffic on the road. So it was like, you guys had the luxury of being, on relatively empty roads. But the problem was that if someone called you in, it wasn't like you had any scapegoats. Like, we're the
only people out there. The roads were totally empty, which was great.
There's definitely no other black sedan doing what you're doing in this whole state.
No, I remember saying to Chris after we heard ourselves get called in, and I'm just thinking about, like, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get arrested. Like, I can take a ticket, of course, but it's going to take time to give that ticket, which we didn't want to have to stop for. And I remember saying to Chris, like, well, if I can just make it to the Colorado border, we'll be home free.
Right.
I mean, how big can Nebraska be? So I said to Chris, like, how far are we from the border? How many more miles to the border? He was like 400.
Yeah, it was a long way. And then your mind must have gone between, well, do we play it safe, or do I just drive as fast as possible to kill that 400 miles?
Yeah, we drove fast.
You did. And I remember too, there was a spotter at the border. That was the thing. I remember really lining up that spotter and being like, I need to know everything that goes on at that border, because if they decided maybe Nebraska is not the hottest spot for like BLM protests and stuff going on. Maybe they'll have some fun and set up a little roadblock for you before you get into Colorado. And there was a bridge, like a gantry up there. And I remember watching you guys approach that gantry and just thinking like, please God, don't let there be any police sitting on top of that or like watching or waiting. And it just fizzled out. And that was the thing. It's all this psychological warfare. So did you find that having information like that was even beneficial? Like, had you never known that call got placed, would you have been more relaxed? Would it have been a better experience?
That's tough to say. There's positives and negatives there. I mean, obviously there's a sense of nerves that comes into play when you know the police are looking for you. That you wouldn't feel. If you didn't know that, you wouldn't feel like that. But also, I remember always being excited about how close we were to the next spotter. Are they 25 miles away? Are they 20 miles away? Because the closer I got to that spotter, the fresher that information is, the shorter the gap there is between them and us, and the safer I feel about doing what I'm doing and not having any consequences from law enforcement about going the speed we were going. So you're always like looking forward to that next spotter just for the information intake, but also it's like one more milestone. Like we've passed one more spotter, we're one more spotter closer to the finish line too.
And I can remember from a mission control standpoint, that stressed me out a lot because in other situations, especially with I say it like only 30 spotters across the country, but with only 30, that's a big gap. And it was hard to make sure that there was never dead space. There was never like blind space between the spotters. And in Nebraska, I remember being really, really cautious about trying to overlap them. So that way there was no space that you guys didn't have information. And honestly, I don't remember what happened. I don't remember if we had any dead space. I don't remember if we overlapped them correctly, but I just remember entering Colorado and being so relieved.
So relieved. That's exactly what I was going to say, is when we crossed the border into Colorado, I just felt so much better. Like all that drama is behind us now. And I guess my mind shifted in that moment to now I'm thinking about my stint is coming to an end. And this is not the most fun thing to do. And I'm tired. I've been awake, who knows how many hours at this point. I've been driving so fast and so hyper-focused, and I'm like ready to not be driving anymore. And I don't want to say to these guys, like, I'm tired, I don't want to drive anymore. Like I would never say that.
No, but
I'm feeling like I'm ready to be done with this and go do the job of the person in the other seat now. I'm ready to not have the wheel in my hands.
And that's a good, it's funny. It's like, yes, you don't want to like quote unquote let them down or whatever, but the honesty of what you're capable of doing in the moment in the car is really critical, because if you're at the point where you're like, I don't think I can continue driving, like you got to speak up. And it's like, luckily the fuel tank usually speaks for you where it just starts going down.
So that's true, except in the first stint, we were dealing with, mountains and more congested roads. Although they weren't congested, they were more congested in the first stint than in the stint that I had, because in the middle of the country, the roads were so flat and so straight and so empty that at the same speeds we were going in the first stint, I was able to drive with better fuel economy.
Yeah, I think you made it another 150 miles. You were like,
I thought I was going to drive, 900-ish miles in my stint, and then the first stint was less than that, I think, and my stint ended up being over 1,000 miles. I was behind the wheel for what seemed like forever.
That car,
and we're doing calculations, and I'm asking like, well, how far is it until we think we're going to stop? Because I'm starting to feel like really fatigued at this point. And the math for the fuel consumption is like, we're not stopping for another 200 miles.
It was crazy.
I'm like, oh my God, I have to drive a lot further.
You made it to like Vail.
Yeah, somewhere in like the Denver area, I remember.
Because I remember we got Matt, the driver on the first stint. He's the one who like scoped out the that fuel stop for you, and then it was funny because Chris was like, "Oh, see if he can like reserve 2 pumps," and I remember he did it, and then I'm like, and then he stopped, and I'm like, "You got to move your fucking car, man!" Like he stopped in the pumps and was like, "I'm here," and we're like, "Yeah, you're in the way." So he went to reserve the pump and ended up blocking the pumps. But anyway, you got in, you did your thing, and what was it like getting out of the hot seat and being like, good, I'm going to go fuel this car?
You don't get a chance to kind of exhale when you stop, because we pulled into that gas station one of our spotters, like you mentioned, Matt, he's there, he's blocking 2 pumps for us. And, we have coordinated exactly who's responsible for what when we pull into the gas station, whose credit cards are being used, who's swiping on which side, who's pumping with which handle, who's running into the gas station. We're throwing away Chris's pee bottles. I mean, we are like well-rehearsed pit crew team. So the second you slam that thing in a park, you open the door and you're doing whatever job you need to do in that moment. And we're all running.
Do you remember seeing Matt? Do you remember seeing Matt? Like, because to me,
I do. Yeah.
What was it like? Because to me, all right, this is how I'd imagine that. Like, it's such a foreign thing to be doing in a foreign place, and all the thing is weird. It would be like when you see your mom at, like, you're in the 3rd grade and your mom happens to be at the school, and you're like, "Oh, mom's here!" Like, was it like an exciting thing to see someone you knew at this?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see like a teammate and a friend who's waiting for you for sure. But I don't have time to like shoot the shit with them. It's like, hey man, gotta go. And I remember like running feverishly into the gas station to use the restroom real quick. I was the first to go. The other 2 guys were going to stay and do car stuff. We're going to add our fuel additives and do our windshield tearaways and all this other stuff. So my job is to go in, take a leak as fast as I can and come out. Well, I'm running into this rest stop and I get into the bathroom and there's like 2 urinals there and I'm standing at the urinal and I'm so over caffeinated, out of breath, winded, I can't even get going. Like I haven't had the opportunity to go to the bathroom in 10 plus hours, and now I have an opportunity and I can't go.
No, that would have been a 10-minute pee for me, 100%. There's no way I would have been able to pee.
Yeah, just trying to go as fast as we can. And I remember Durden came running in, and now he's at the urinal next to me, and I'm like, oh man, I'm behind. I gotta go. It was crazy.
So, Colorado, you've just rushed your way back into the car. You're full of fuel. Things were like, it was smooth, but a little hectic at the beginning. And then you're like, okay, good. I'm back in the car. Were you shotgun at this point or back in the car? Okay. So you're shotgun. Yeah. You get on the road and it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes of driving or 15 minutes of driving before you guys basically came to a grinding halt.
Well, I thought it was a little strange how many people were out and about on a Sunday afternoon. It just didn't seem pandemic-y in that area. There were people just out and about on the roads, going wherever they're going, doing whatever they're doing. It just seemed odd that we were doing 50, 55, 60, trying to, weave traffic where we could. And I guess I just expected the roads to be more open. And then, traffic starts to build up. And at one point we come to a total stop on the highway and I'm like, what the hell's going on? What is this? We're at a dead stop. What is happening right now? It
was very confusing for us as well because Mission Control, I'm speaking to my spotter who just cruised through this section. And I'm thinking, what has gone wrong?
Yeah. So I'm in the front seat and I don't understand what's happening at this point. We're not moving. People in front of us are like putting their cars in park. Ugh. Like this isn't like slow traffic. This is no movement at all. Chris is in the backseat screaming all profanities known to man.
It was a brutal car for sure.
We're watching the time on our computer change from what looked like we were going to just smash this record to, okay, we're going to need to really try now. We have a real problem. We can't stay stopped here any second longer than we are. We've already been stopped for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Chris said, shut the car off. We're going to save fuel. Shut it off. We're going to sit here. I think we shut the car off. We sat there for like 9 minutes. I mean, in those moments, you're just thinking about how everything you've done could be all for naught.
Right. Yeah. And it turned out that they had just done like one lane at a time, back and forth because there was a rock slide or something like that where they were cleaning.
There was some sort of mudslide, rock slide, something. And I don't even remember even seeing it. I remember hearing about it after the fact, but yeah, the road was 2 lanes in each direction under normal conditions. And they had brought that 4-lane road down to 1 lane.
Oh my God.
That they were alternating traffic in both directions.
That was when I think I realized how important stop time was in this event, because I'm looking at it like, well, guys, I mean, relax. We just got here so quickly. Everything's fine. We'll be able to make it up. And I think Chris recognized the severity of what 9 minutes of unplanned downtime meant and how little time there actually was to spare to achieve that 25:39 record. I mean, it was like severe. What was it like?
I think we had a moving average in the low 120s before that happened.
How did it feel for you though? Because, all right, so I'll put it this way. I've been in situations with people who are like, either, more experienced than me in something, and I'm helping out and I'm doing the thing. And suddenly like you see their reactions change and you're kind of like, wait, what does this mean? Like,
oh, they were furious.
Like how was that for you? Cause I think if I was in the car, I would have been mirroring their energy, not necessarily because I felt it first, but because I'd be like, oh no, like this is really bad. Did you feel like you had to console them, or did you feel like, what was it? I don't know. Cause I felt like on a mission control end, I felt like I had to try to keep them cool or something. I don't know. But like, what was it like for you in the car?
Yeah, I don't remember consoling them. I remember just anger and discussion about strategy, about well, what are we going to have to do now? Because I'm with a couple of guys that are real sharp, in terms of planning and strategy, and we're going to have to change something in order to overcome this now, because what we were going to do initially isn't going to be good enough anymore.
No.
So there were some conversations about, well, we're going to just have to go all out. We're going to have to pick up this much time in this area and this much time in this area. We're going to have to hold this average in this area. And all these things that we thought we weren't going to have to do now are all in play.
Yeah.
To even have a chance.
So you guys blast through that. You get through it. And now it's like, all right, back into a rhythm. It's daytime. Sun's come up. Things are moving along a little bit. But then we get the next call. Was it Arizona, a little tiny nugget of Arizona, just the tip, just the corner, that we had our spotter Rafal basically telling me that he was in a dead stop. And you guys ended up not really having to stop, but you kind of it was slow, but you cruised through a little bit.
We heard about the fact that he was stopped. And of course the conversation immediately goes back to anger, rage, strategizing again about other roads. We started talking about using fire roads.
I remember giving you guys fire roads only to try to calm the situation as almost like a laughable thing. Like I wanted Chris to have an exit strategy, even if it was off a fucking cliff. Like I just needed him to know that there were options that he could say no to. And I felt like that was enough to try to.
Yeah. So I don't know that that's a real possible scenario versus something that you're just telling him to keep the mood positive. And now I'm thinking about like, well, we're going to have to divert. We could be going down a road. This road could have a dead end. We're going to do 100 miles an hour on a dirt road in the middle of the desert. This is unbelievable. I can't believe this is happening right now.
I mean, and it really looked like a Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote kind of cartoon. Like that area was very much like there. It was not habitable. It looked very dangerous. If you guys got stuck somewhere, we would have had to helicopter you out.
There's nothing out there, and yet there's people everywhere. They're towing their boats and their RVs and their campers.
The lake people.
Where are all you people going?
I called them lake people in the last podcast with Chris and Chris. I got a lot of comments about that, and they were like, hey, we're not so bad. And I was like, I'll never forgive the lake people. I can't. There
were just so many people going, I don't know where places. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe you were in the middle of the desert with nothing for hundreds of miles around, and we're just packed with cars on the highway.
Bonkers.
Packed.
So all right. I mean, everyone knows the end of this story because you didn't win, but you're in the back of the car or whatever as you cross the finish line. It was a brutal end, and I know, like, for what one of the Christoph, we'll call him. He always has the unpleasant finishing of this run where he has to go and basically just be a psycho through California.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't have driven any better than he did. He drove like an animal.
Well, I mean, how did you feel in the back of the car? Because I'm watching this on a camera and thinking to myself, thank God I'm not in this car.
Yeah, so I'm in the front seat for this, and you're holding on. I'm a passenger. There's no way I'm going to be a passenger seat driver or backseat driver, whatever one you call it. I'm not telling him how to drive.
You just shut up and go.
Yeah, I'm doing whatever I can do to help him, and I'm holding on, hoping we're not going to die or go to jail.
How did it feel going? Oh, like how did it feel arriving at the Portofino? Because for you, I'd imagine you have a bunch of mixed emotions. Because for you, at the end of the day, you have just accomplished something pretty incredible, and you've just done this kind of bucket list item in your life that is probably something you've always wanted to do, and that you're like, wow,
100%.
I get to say I drove across the country in. It's still a very respectable time. It was 26, 29. Like, I mean, seriously,
I think at the time that we did it, that time, while not public, but we knew was the third fastest in history.
Yeah.
So to think about the fact that, I was something to that degree was awesome. Even though we might not have won the over record, I felt really like we had something really awesome. So I had a great feeling of pride in what we had done. They didn't. They were obviously more disappointed in what took place.
Yeah, that's what I felt like. I felt for you because I remember, obviously, I was disappointed because now I had been kind of involved in the first run and now involved in the second run, and it was hard to watch them get crushed in this. But for you, I felt this really weird sensation for this, like, this new member of the car that, on the one hand, you're like, I mean, of course you deserve to be excited and proud and happy. On the other hand, it was like, could you smile in front of them while you finish this?
Yeah, I mean, we took some pictures at the end, and the mood was, mixed emotions. I think we felt like, we just had terrible luck, and they had felt like we had terrible luck again because they were the victim of really weird circumstances the first time. And to have everything go exactly how we wanted it to go this time and really kind of be screwed by a mudslide in Colorado, and then just super busy highways in the last, 400 or 500 miles of the run, was really frustrating for them because the first run, a lot of things didn't go according to plan.
Yeah, it was very amateur.
A lot of things went wrong. And in this run, the things that we were in control of all went right.
Yeah.
I mean, everything we did went exactly the way we wanted it. And we were just the victim of some really, really bad luck.
And I know that there was definitely, I remember the consoling thing was at least we beat the white Audi. That was
that. I know those guys really wanted to beat them. That's true.
That was just funny because I think I am gonna get the Audi team on here because I have so many questions for them. Not even about their run. I honestly almost don't even care about their run. I care about the aftermath because those guys had to deal with the largest PR shitstorm in probably all of Canada.
We had the opportunity to meet them a few months after the fact. I did have a chance to talk with them and ask some questions. And
Chris was just texting them for me yesterday, and I was like, look, I don't know if they're ever gonna want to show their faces or like say anything. I'm like, but I gotta get this story in the can. I need to know.
The way the whole thing came together is a pretty funny story.
So that brings me to now. You are a bona fide cannonballer, man. Like, what changed for you? I mean, going from I've spotted or I kind of know what this looks like from the outside to now you're going to friggin' parties, man. You're hanging out with the big boys, like the guys what did the Cannonball community look like you thought it would look like? Are these the guys you expected?
It was a really mixed group of folks. So I guess I kind of expected that. What I didn't expect was how we would really be welcomed with open arms. Yeah. I felt like these guys were all legends in their world, and they were part of circles that I was not a part of. And that we were really outsiders. We did everything in secrecy. No one knew who we were. No one knew what we were doing. And then to be with them and meet them after the fact and be treated like an equal was really a surprise. To know that they thought of me as one of them and welcomed me into the community. That was really cool.
It's fascinating because it does. When you're not part of it, when you haven't met some of these people, I think of the same thing in YouTube land all the time. When if 3 or 4 years ago you'd mention a bunch of like famous YouTubers or whatever, now it's just like, oh well, yeah, like that's my buddy, like those are the guys, yeah, that's of course, yeah, you want to meet them, yeah, come over here, I'll introduce you, you know what I mean? And it's like not a big deal. And the Cannonball world, it's very similar to that because these guys are celebrities in their own right to just a very strange subset of fans, which are basically us. And then you get into this and you're like, oh my God, like those are the guys I've read about them. I've heard about them.
I've read about them. I've read the books. I've read the articles. I've watched the movies. I've followed the stories on YouTube. And now I'm one of these people, whether, and you almost feel like I am and I belong, and you think that they're not going to think that. And you think, well, these people aren't going to think that I'm the same as they are.
Yeah.
And that's totally not the case. They were like the nicest group of people, all saying, congratulations, what you did is amazing. Like, you're part of the fraternity of lunatics now. And like, we're brothers. It was so weird how awesome everyone was.
I really do think you're right about that because it feels like you almost think you almost expect to be greeted with like the fifth degree or third degree where they're like, wait a minute, like show us the data, show me the satellite foot, like like prove it. But it's like if you have the right people who saw what was going on, like Ed was involved. He would watch what's going on. He knew the data logging we were using and stuff like that. So like when you have some of the right people on your side in this, it makes it very easy because you're not like, you don't have to be vetted by 20 people. They're like, oh yeah, no, we trust you did the thing.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the second time around now, we were a known commodity as a team versus the first time nobody knew who we were. And now the second time, they know we have some cachet, I guess. There's some credibility built up there in what we've already done. So that was cool too.
Oh, for sure. Was there anyone I just for this, I have to ask this question. Was there anyone you were starstruck by when you kind of entered the Cannonball community that you were like, whoa, like I'm meeting this guy? Because for me, YouTube land, the biggest time, I think the time I was most starstruck was like meeting Alex Roy, which sounds really dumb now because he's somebody that I could text and be like, oh, hey, I hope you're doing well, blah, 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 like happy birthday, whatever. But like the first time I met him, I think I couldn't pick my jaw up off the floor because like he was this legend through my childhood. Was there anyone in like the Cannonball community that you kind of like had a shading and grin meeting and thinking like, oh, I can't believe I'm having a conversation with this guy. You like can't pay attention to what they're saying.
Meeting Dave Mayer was pretty cool
Yeah.
and not something that I expected was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because we thought that this gathering of folks was really only going to be folks that were associated with COVID runs and had done COVID runs.
Right.
Or had done runs like in the last year. So I had no idea that Dave was going to be there, and getting the chance to meet Dave and talk with Dave and, share stories with him was pretty cool. Because he's a guy I've seen in the movies, I've, read about, and now I'm like hanging out with him.
For people who don't know, Dave Maher was the co-driver on Alex Roy's run, the famous run. And I actually have never met him because he had a horrific motorcycle accident prior to the screenings of JF's movie Apex: The Secret Race Across America. And he didn't make it to the events until like later on. So when they did like the pre-screening that I went to, I mean, it was such a weird thing because there's Alex Roy and all the drive guys, all of these people. Like I spent my day with Mike Spinelli that day. It was great, but I was like, I never met Dave, and I always thought that was such a weird thing. I'm like, wow, like this is Dave's party, and I'm like, he's not at the party.
I mean, I'm sitting here. I had dinner with Arnie. I got a great chance to talk to Doug and so many other folks. I mean, getting to know Fred was hilarious. And I'm just with all these people that I can't believe that I'm meeting and getting to hang out with. And then to know that they think that I'm just like them and we're the same. That's just super cool.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Like, I remember you guys going. I didn't go because it was one of those weird times when it was like, COVID was still, fast and furious. I was being very cautious about my parents because I'm living at their house, and it was a whole thing. And it was just, I definitely had FOMO when you guys went to that event. But at the same time, like seeing how happy you were, there was no sense of like jealousy. I was just excited to hear your stories, and I was happy to have contributed to the fact that you guys got to be part of that. It was so special.
Super cool, and really just in awe of how much time and effort and money Doug put forth to produce that weekend for everyone. He didn't have to do that. And that was really that speaks volume to Doug and his character, because he put on a great weekend, invited, organized, planned, gathered, paid for food and drinks and basically like dinner and entertainment with a, comedy show stage and awards and stories.
I mean, he like roasted you guys. He gave you.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
So fun. And you could tell not only did he really, really, really care, but he spent a lot of time and money to, have a great event for everybody. And to cap it all off with a surprise fireworks show at the end that none of us knew about, where if you watched the recent presidential inauguration in Washington, that was a lot of fireworks. I think Doug had about 2 fireworks less than what you saw in Washington in his own backyard that night. It was unbelievable.
And is that not just a testament to like the kind of people who would have this record?
Yeah, people with just no limits. They do whatever needs to be done, and we go all out with everything we do.
It's absolutely wild. And that's the thing. I think it is the Cannonball community is such a weird thing, because they're all such good guys. There's so many like very intense thinkers and wild men. And there's a combination of being like moderately insane and very clever and intelligent at the same time. Like there's a lot that goes into these things. And you can't just be crazy. If you're just crazy, you won't win. And if you're just smart, you won't win. You have to be both. You have to have the ability to disconnect reasoning to put your foot down, and you have to have the intelligence and planning to back up what's going to happen if you do put your foot down.
Yeah, and those lines are shifting now, because as we've talked about in the past, the bar keeps getting raised, and it's now at a point where it's really dangerous.
How do you feel about where we're at right now? Because let's say anything sub 26 hours, I think is a really, Cannonball has shifted a lot for me, and it's not something I encourage people to do. It's not something that I don't promote it. I like the stories. I like telling these stories, and I like hearing from people. But when someone tells me like, I'm going to go break the record, I either don't really respond to them or I dissuade them. I'm getting to a point where like where we're at 25:30, let's say, would be a record breaking run, is really, really wild.
Yeah, I think people who make those claims or those accusations don't understand what it really takes to do. It's so much more difficult than I think people think to do. And, what we learned in the third run is that I think it's statistically possible, with the correct road conditions and the right amount of luck and the right team and the right planning, to potentially do a time in the 24s. I do think that's possible. You need to be perfect, and you need 1,000 things to go right that aren't in your control. And if one of those 1,000 things doesn't go your way, it's not going to happen.
Do you think the sport lives on in other ways that aren't necessarily record-breaking runs? Like because I don't think, to me, for example, when I think of Cannonball Run, way back, you think of the movie, right? You think of a Countach and a whole bunch of people and like just this calamity of mistakes and conning and trying to steal the race from your team, your competitors. And if you said to me, and I had the funds to do it, like, we're getting 5 cars, we're going for it, and I'd be like, that's great. I genuinely wouldn't care how fast I got there as long as I wasn't last.
Right. Well, it's an adventure of a different kind at that point. You're not trying to break a world record. You are having fun with your friends doing a crazy challenge. So Chris and I were talking about this, and we were talking about how for years and years we've traveled with the same group of folks in the Northeast, and we've done the same events and the same shows and the same cruises and the same rallies, and to now be part of this other community of folks and have exposure to some of these other events, whether it's C2C or some of the other trophy memorial dashes that they do, or maybe they buy $500 cars and race these jalopnik cars across the country. That sounds fun. We've never done anything like that before. That sounds like something that would be fun to do, and see if you can make it.
I drove. So our friend Ed Owen over at EAS, he invited me out the other day to drive his 1987 AMC Eagle, and I thought to myself, I'm like, oh, this is a Doug and Arnie car. Like this is a car that deserves to drive across the country with a broken speedometer and just crank across the country in all of its crushed brown velour glory.
Yes, maybe even backwards and not forwards.
You wouldn't be able to tell, that's for sure. But that's what I'm saying. I do think the sport lives on in other ways, but there's a level where now, there's this like law of diminishing returns, right? And in order to get down to this level, there needs to be genuine money involved. Like, I don't think I am capable. I'm not capable of funding my own team to get into a 25-hour run at this point. That's a lot. You need a lot of car. You need a lot of people. You need a lot of technology.
Sure.
But
I don't think you're likely to find a major sponsor for something that's highly illegal either.
No, you're really like, nobody's going to want to be a part of that, because if something goes wrong and you're like, yeah, Nissan gave me a GTR with all these fuel tanks, and then like we kill somebody, like, oh yeah, Nissan's going to look real good on that. Like,
right. So you have to fund it yourself. And like I said, the bar's so high now that the funding would be very serious. If you want to play at this level, it's not cheap.
So for you then, I mean, that was a big thing ticked off, right? You've ticked the box of, I did a cannonball. You did a beautiful cannonball. It wasn't a joke. It was a serious cannonball, whether it was a record breaker or not. I mean, that was a very incredible time.
I think we did 26:29.
That's some serious stuff. Especially in that car. It's funny because it's like, so we'll get into your cars in a minute, but like you own an S65 AMG, which I drove on the channel. And then the A8 to that S65 AMG is almost what like the M5 competition is to the A8 or the S8, sorry. Where like, I remember you getting back in your S65 and thinking like, I always thought this thing was a total rocket ship, but that S8 is crazy just because, yeah, maybe it only has a smaller engine, but it's like this gearbox and the way it delivers power is like completely
that
crazy.
S8 with the tune that it had was fast.
Like seriously fast.
I mean, I've been driving twin turbo V12 Mercedes for it's got to be almost 10 years now. And to get back into my car after was really the first time that I had driven a big German luxury sedan like that and felt like it was slow.
It's a bizarre
I never felt like that about my own car until after driving that S8.
And then I think the M5 competition that they did after that, it almost did the same for me with the S8, because I was just like, whoa, the things that car could do. It wasn't the 0 to 60s. It was like the 100 to 160s that I was like, oh, holy shit, that Audi doesn't do that. It's just
nuts. I haven't had the pleasure to drive that one, but I heard about it from a lot of folks.
That one was bonkers. But I mean, it's interesting because it's like, that's what I mean. Like you have to be able to really put up some crazy cars, because I mean, like that Audi is no joke. That S8 Plus is 2017. That's not an old car, and it's a fast car by any reasonable standards. But even for Cannonball, it's like dated. We need more.
Well, we didn't think that at the time, and clearly that was the case.
It's nuts. What are your goals for like enjoying motorsports post Cannonball? I think you brought up Dave, and we see the post Cannonball Dave, working on his 993 and all this other stuff in the movie. And what's Sam's post Cannonball enjoyment with the cars?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've been talking about for a long time was doing, our own rallies with smaller groups of people, places that we haven't been before, right? We've done Boston to Tail of the Dragon, and we've done Boston into Canada and done things like the Cabot Trail. And those were great times. Don't get me wrong. That's a lot of fun. I think I'd like to organize a smaller group of cars, somewhere in the 5 to 10 or 15 car range, and do one of these journeys somewhere we've never done it before. And whether that's driving to DC and then loading the cars on the auto train and heading to Florida to drive to the Keys and spending a week doing that trip, or maybe heading west and doing a trip around the Great Lakes and seeing, Detroit. I think those would be fun adventures to do. Those are things I've never done and I'd love to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like you clearly have a passion for motorsport in every sense, because you're not the guy who always has the latest and greatest, fastest thing you can get a hold of. I mean, your collection is exactly what I expect from somebody who can put their money where their mouth is when they say I love cars, because you've got an H1 Hummer, a Nissan Figaro, the ridiculous 600 or 650 horsepower 996 twin turbo, the S65 AMG. I mean, your collection tells me that you like variety and that you just find joy in every side of automotive segments. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, I just, I like things that are unique and special that you're not going to see on the road every day. Just having that rare thing for me is more fun and enjoyable than having the brand new Ferrari or the brand new Lamborghini. And those are awesome. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to have one. But I feel like there are a lot more people that have brand new Lamborghinis and brand new Ferraris than H1s or Nissan Figaros.
Agreed. And I'll tell you, my more memorable car experiences. I mean, I've driven like almost everything under the sun in terms of like, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Your cars, I can vividly remember both putting a giant smile on my face and terrifying the shit out of me. And those are all exciting things to me. And it's funny, the things that terrify me more, it's not the 996, like topping out third and fourth gear on the highway. It's like getting in an H1 Hummer for the first time and trying not to murder the people who are running down the road.
Yeah, it's wide. It's wide.
It's like, and it's weird because that car, it is wide, but like a Raptor is about as wide as a Hummer. It's just the visibility inside the cabin of an H1 is very limited, and it's hard to kind of tell where things are when you're not used to the vehicle. And I've driven bigger vehicles now, and still, I think the H1 is scarier than even a Unimog when it comes to
that. Was probably the car that got me into cars when I was a little kid. I just always wanted an H1, and I remember doing book reports on them when I was in like middle school. I just always wanted one. So I had the opportunity in 2019 to buy one, and it's fantastic. I don't care that it's slow. It's fantastic. I love driving it around. I actually thought I would get a lot of hate from people, and that's not the case. People love it.
It puts a smile.
Everyone's waving and smiling and giving me thumbs up everywhere I go.
It's so much fun, and it sounds ridiculous.
It sounds like a school bus.
Because it is, right? It's the same engine that you'd see in like a school bus, right?
A full-blown school bus sound. Yeah, it's hilarious at all times. How can you not smile when you drive this thing around?
The best part is like if you look. Like I have the biggest shit-eating grin on my face when I've driven that. And so like there's the moment where someone looks at you like, oh, look at this asshole with the Hummer. And then it's like me, skinny Tedward, waving at the people with the dumbest smile on my face. And then they suddenly are like, oh, this is actually quite entertaining. Like I like this vehicle. And I can't imagine, like you have to have the sense of excitement in this thing when you're driving it, or else people are probably going to flip you off.
I guess I just thought I was going to get more hate, from people that were, big into electric cars and saving the planet, but probably thought that I was just being over the top and wasteful. And I really haven't gotten any hate. People love it.
It's also not your daily driver. I mean, that's the thing is I think like I'm all for efficiency. I'm all for like, let's reduce carbon emissions and all this stuff. But like at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, like if I have a few ridiculous gas guzzlers, but I drive them like 1,000 miles a year, like who cares? Sure. Like it's part of the fun,
I can offset the Hummer's footprint by driving the Figaro around. That makes 70 horsepower.
The Figaro and your wife's like 8th gen Civic, like I mean, it doesn't get any better than those two as far as like non-hybrid platforms. Those are probably as efficient as they get. Well, before we sign off, what advice would you give to somebody who is looking to participate in a Cannonball, and what wisdom can you impart to somebody who's maybe not been on a Cannonball, has an idea, is relatively well educated, probably listened to these podcasts, listened to other people's VinWiki videos and things? What would you tell someone who's jumping into this for the first time?
I mean, everyone who is asked that question and answers it says the same thing. They say, don't do this, which I mean, when someone were to say that to me beforehand, that's just more encouragement for me to want to go out and do it. And now that I've done it, I feel like I want to give the same answer and say, don't do this because it wasn't fun. And you're really kind of putting a lot of things on the line when you do that. So if I wasn't going to give you the don't answer, the don't do this answer, I guess I would say do your homework and read and research and have conversations with and watch and consume everything that you possibly can so that you have the best possible understanding of what you're getting into before you do it. Up to and including maybe being a spotter for someone else beforehand.
Yeah, get involved. That's a good point. You got to get involved with teams and kind of figure out what it looks like from the inside out. And you're totally right. You got to do your homework. I've recently started explaining it to people like every kid wants to be an astronaut, but most of those kids don't want to be engineers. They just want to get in the rocket. And it's like, no, you kind of have to know what you're doing before you strap into that rocket. And that's the thing is Cannonball there are people who are just rocket men who they're like, well, I light the fuse and I send it. But I think at this level now, you've got to be the engineer. You've got to be somebody who's a thoughtful planner. And that's you. You are a very thoughtful planner. I don't know a thing. Even when you put on a little party, you already know how many people are coming, how much food you're getting. Oh, we need this many chairs. And how much wood am I going to need for this fire? Because we're going to be here for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. And, I kind of laugh because you are very good at doing these things without making it look like you've done the planning. But every time you put something on, I'm like, Sam really thought about this. Like you set up our mission control room. And I'll be honest, I kind of walk into that a little, I know what I need to do, but when I walked into the room for the first time, you say, yeah, come scout it. Just let me know if there's anything else you need. I walked into that room. I was almost in tears. I'm like, you gave us all these tables and chairs and everyone had like a notepad. Like we were in a business conference room and it was developed for an illegal race across the country.
Yeah. I just try to think of everything that you guys would possibly need to be successful and, remove any roadblocks or obstacles and try to make everyone comfortable and happy. And, like I said, do my homework beforehand and try to be as prepared as I can be.
We'll keep it at that. Well, Sam, thank you for coming on, telling your story. I think you are one of the most organic cannonballers there is because you didn't necessarily go into this as a planner like, hey, I'm going to do a cannonball. You kind of just right place, right time, right people. You are the right guy for the job and you were hired.
Yeah, very, very fortunate to have had the opportunity for sure.
Great. Well, we will talk to you very soon. And thanks for being on.
All right, sir. Good luck. Thanks for everything.
So what do you think, Sam? A total car guy through and through? I think so. I think his collection speaks volumes. But not only that, he puts his money where his mouth is, and off he goes into the world of cannonballing coast to coast as fast as he can. It's unbelievable. I hope we get Sam back on the podcast at some point soon, just because this guy has stories for days. This is just a little piece of the puzzle here with Cannonball and some of the Boston car scene stuff. But man, it's been a ride. Thank you guys so much for listening and supporting this podcast and of course the YouTube channel. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.